am back in my regular studio doing a new episode of After 9, and I want to thank you for checking into this episode. It's been a crazy couple of days. I've been off for a little bit, and now I'm back, and I dropped a couple of interviews yesterday that I think you'll really like if you give them a chance and check those episodes out. Before I get into today's episode, let me just tell you a little bit about some of the great people that I spoke to yesterday, and these are available as a podcast as well. I was talking about the topic that's very important to me, speed enforcement cameras, something I've litigated time and time again in this podcast. And I know that there's a lot of folks that are interested in this topic. So I thought, let's get some different perspective. I want to hear first off from a mayor in a city that has these cameras. And I wanted to ask some pointed questions about where the money goes and why we need these things and whether or not they're actually effective at slowing people down. Well, out of all of the mayors, and quite a few of them listen to this show regularly, only one of them stepped forward and said, you know what? I'll answer whatever questions you want to ask me. His name is Cam Guthrie. He is the mayor of Guelph, Ontario. Like I said, this is out as a full episode, but give it just a little preview here. This is Guelph Mayor Cam Guthrie. It really seems like municipalities haven't wanted to compromise until the premier made a big deal of this. I mean, we could have agreed on these things that are common sense years ago, and there probably wouldn't be this kind of uproar and backlash over the cameras. Where was the compromise a few months ago when people were getting real angry before Premier Ford stepped in?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair question, too. I don't know. I think I would say because the data was showing that there was safer streets, that the cameras were working, that, I can only speak for myself, that it's like I understood the arguments that were coming, but I also saw the other side of like safer streets. The kids are safer, the parents are appreciative, the schools are appreciative. And like any elected official, you're always going to get this push-pull of difference of opinions on different programs and services that we're providing. I would also suggest that it was sort of a new thing for us only in the last couple of years. And so part of it for me was like, the last couple of years, almost like a trial run, like, is it working? Is it not? And then I would say that I kind of came to the conclusion myself, as I said, even before the province made the announcements, that I felt like, okay, we've had a little bit of time on this. I think there are some issues that do need to be addressed, and maybe that's where those compromise positions could be adopted by the province and agreed upon by a vast majority of sort of people that could say, hey, if it's these limited scopes, time of day, warnings, things like that, the things that I suggested, maybe we can get to a point where we could keep them because, again, the data does suggest that it works.
That was the mayor of Guelph, Ontario, Cam Guthrie. That episode is available. I believe it's episode 200. I can't believe I've done 200 episodes of this podcast going back to January the 6th. Where does the time go? Cam was great. I'll give him full credit. While him and I disagree on these speed enforcement cameras, that's what a civil conversation should sound like. That's when a taxpayer can question a politician and get straightforward answers. And what you heard in that interview, if you listened to it, and hopefully you will if you haven't, is Cam admitting that maybe the cities didn't get it quite right. Maybe the idea isn't that bad, but maybe it needs a lot more refining. And I thought that was a great moment from Mayor Cam Guthrie talking about those cameras. That episode is available. By the way, it's also available by video. You can watch that interview on YouTube if you want. Now, the other perspective I wanted to get was from someone at Queen's Park. And the government doesn't do a lot of interviews, to be perfectly honest. They don't sit down with people like me and answer questions. However, I did get a taker from a Liberal member of provincial parliament, Rob Cerjanec. Rob is the member from Ajax, and him and I had just such a great conversation, not just about speed enforcement cameras, but also about his priorities when he goes back into the legislature. Rob talked a lot about these cameras, and we talked about compromise. I want to play just a little bit of that interview as well and remind you again, the full interview is available as a podcast. I believe that is episode 201. And that's very offside of what people have always known as drivers, that the cops always going to give you about 10 kilometers grace. They're not going to pull you over 10 over. But some of these machines are ticketing people for that. And if people know what the threshold is, then maybe they're less likely to get a ticket or speed in the first place. But there's not a consistent playing field province-wide.
I'm with you. There should be a consistent playing field. And that's my message to the premier. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Make the system work. Make it be fair. Because I think that's quite reasonable. You're 10 over. Maybe you shouldn't get a ticket. Don't necessarily want you going 10 over the limit. I know when I drive, I think we all go over the limit every now and then. And Waze tells me school zone ahead, speed camera ahead. And I say, oh, wait, you know what? I better slow down. But it then reminds me when I see the sign for a school zone somewhere else, well, maybe I should actually slow down a little bit as well. It's a good reminder for us sometimes.
That, again, just a little bit of my full-length interview with Rob Cerjanec. He is the member of provincial parliament for Ajax, Ontario. And I got to tell you, I am really, really impressed with how those chats went. I was talking to a mayor who was in favor of speed enforcement cameras. And if you listen regularly, you know that I'm not. I also talked to a Liberal member of provincial parliament who also is in favor of these cameras. And the conversation stayed civil. I love civil discourse. And unfortunately, the assassination of Charlie Kirk was the reminder I needed that I need to get that message back out there that, yeah, we can talk out our issues. It's okay if we disagree. And wherever possible, we should strive to find a compromise. So thank you again to Rob. Thank you again to Cam. Those episodes are available. I'd really appreciate it if you went back and gave them a listen. They're right before this episode. Now I'm going to jump into the content for today. It is the day after. Yesterday was National Truth and Reconciliation Day. That's a national holiday federally here in Canada. That's something that was created by Justin Trudeau and one of the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There's a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but I was scanning through social media yesterday expecting the worst, and I did get it. Here's what I mean by that. There's a lot of folks who feel that because in the search for bodies at these former residential schools, they haven't found any bodies, that this is a needless holiday. We don't need to have Truth and Reconciliation Day. They never found the bodies that they said were there, so the whole thing is useless. I'm going to respectfully disagree with your perspective on that. And I know, I hear it. Justin Trudeau used the sonogram, I believe they were using on the ground outside some residential schools, and they found a whole bunch of anomalies that they said were probably bodies. And that's when the whole country went into mourning. Justin Trudeau proclaimed a holiday, and then he went surfing in Tofino, if you recall. Well, listen, I know that they didn't find the bodies there that they thought they were going to, but it really doesn't take away from the tragedy of residential schools. When you look back on the history of what happened here, and I don't think we should forget the history here, I think that you'll realize that probably the least we can do is have a day of national observance. Should it be anything more than a day of observance? I mean, it's a holiday for some, but not for others. Another excuse for politicians and bankers to get the day off. In this case, radio people also get the day off because we're federally regulated. I don't know if everybody should have the day off or if nobody should have the day off, but I also don't think that we should diminish the importance of celebrating not celebrating. Boy, that's the wrong word. The importance of acknowledging what went on with the residential schools here in Canada, the history that we do know, and vow to make sure that something like that never, ever happens again. And if you think it couldn't happen, hold your breath. I mean, who knows what's coming? So anyway, I do still celebrate National Truth and Reconciliation Day. Maybe that's the right word in that context. I did take the day yesterday and I did spend it observing, and I hope that everybody did, because it is an important day and it's more than just wearing orange shirts and platitudes from politicians. Another thing I want to bring up before I get to some audio for you, and I do have lots of it today. You're going to hear from Pierre Poilievre. You're going to hear from President Trump. You're going to hear from the Speaker of the House in America, Mike Johnson, and a whole bunch more. But before I even get there, today is an important day in Ontario because the minimum wage goes up again. Minimum wage is now up to $17.60 an hour, an increase of 40 cents per hour, or roughly for a full-time worker, about $800 a year, they say. Student minimum wage goes up to $16.60 an hour. I understand that if you make minimum wage, this is probably good for you because you just got a raise. But I'm wondering, how much further are we going to raise it? This is something that I am really interested in because I want to see businesses survive and thrive. And while I do want to see people paid a fair wage for their work, I also want to point out that every time minimum wage goes up, that leads to an increase in all of our cost of living. You know, when the grocery store has to pay their employees more, they're going to raise prices. When those fast food restaurants have to pay their employees more, they're going to raise their prices. And that's the catch that I don't know that people fully understand. You know, as minimum wage goes up, great, but that also increases the cost of everything for all of us. It wasn't that long ago that it was generally understood minimum wage is the minimum wage, but it's not necessarily supposed to be a living wage. There's some people arguing that we need to keep raising the minimum wage at the rate of inflation so that somebody making minimum wage can lead a healthy, prosperous life. I don't really know that that's the point of minimum wage. I don't know that it's supposed to be a living wage. You're supposed to be paid fairly, compensated well for the work that you do, but I don't know that you can take a minimum wage job, which are typically entry-level jobs, and make that your living wage. And I don't know if we're doing ourselves a service here by trying to get it to that point. Do you understand what I mean? That's my perspective on minimum wage, but there is a different one. Yesterday, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith talked about the minimum wage increases that are happening in various parts of Canada today, and she had a slightly different take, and I think it's worth hearing.
Also got the highest youth unemployment rate, and when the NDP increased the minimum wage from $10 to $15, we saw mass layoffs of young people, and in particular in rural Alberta. So until we can make some progress on reducing youth unemployment, we have to make sure that the wage rate is not going to be a deterrent to that. And so we've rolled out a new program for youth employment incentive. We're subsidizing employers $10 an hour for 400 hours to just give that extra boost so that they start hiring kids on their payroll. So we're going to see if we can start seeing those numbers go down, and then we can have further conversations. But I don't want to put any more barriers in place to employers hiring young people.
And, you know, I think that that's a fair point to make from Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. Yeah. Hey, again, if you got a raise today because you make minimum wage, good for you. But there's consequences for doing something like this. And yeah, Premier Smith pointed out, as minimum wage goes up, there's going to be less opportunity for young people. This at a time when there's already very little opportunity for young people. If we raise the minimum wage, businesses have got a decision to make. Well, do I want to bring on someone else and pay them that wage? Or can I just learn to live with one less employee and save the money? And when minimum wage goes up, businesses have to make decisions like that. And again, I already pointed out that as the cost goes up for businesses, the cost is going to go up for all of us. So feel however you want to feel. There's a couple of different angles on raising minimum wage. I think at some point soon, we're going to have a conversation about what's the ceiling? How much higher should it go? You know, if we had a minimum wage around $15 an hour, $14, $13, $12 an hour, would we be okay? Would businesses then be hiring more people because it's more affordable to have labor working for your company? I have to think that if labor were cheaper, businesses would be more inclined to hire. As labor rates go up, they're less likely to hire and more likely to empty out some of their payroll. They want to try and clean some salaries off the books. So minimum wage increases, again, they're great for some, but it's going to mean job losses. Some people are going to get the horns, unfortunately, and it does mean prices are going to go up. So you kind of got to pick your poison when it comes to that. And we also have to ask ourselves, is minimum wage supposed to be a living wage? Something that if you work minimum wage, 40 hours a week, you can afford your rent, your groceries, your utilities, all your other bills and cost of living. I really don't know that that's what minimum wage was intended to do, but it seems to be the way the province and many across Canada are trying to stick handle this is into a living wage. And we got to talk about that at some point. I'm going to move on now because one of the things that you are likely hearing in the headlines a lot today is about dysfunction in America. The U.S. government is shut down once again. The reason that it gets shut down, for those who don't know, is the U.S. has a budget and they have to stick to their budget. Well, spending may exceed what's in the budget. And if they don't have enough money left in the budget, they need to pass a temporary budget bill to fund the government even more to get them through whatever period or to try and get them to make whatever purchase it is that they have to make. But if lawmakers don't agree on extending their debt ceiling, if they don't agree on funding the government even further, then that means the government grinds to a halt. And that means federal workers are laid off. It means really no government business is being done. And that's a big problem in America. The lawmakers are arguing over something that I think we could probably relate to here in Canada very well. See, the Democrats, they really want health care provided for illegal aliens. The Republicans would argue, no, they're not supposed to be here. We're not giving them free health care. That's sort of the baseline on the debate. Let's hear from the U.S. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, doing an interview yesterday.
I would credit President Trump for calling us into the Oval Office yesterday. He's operating in good faith. There is no daylight at all between the President of the United States and the Republican majorities in the House and Senate. We're all united. We want to keep the government open. We have done our work. The House passed the bill, bipartisan, by the way. We had one Democrat join us, okay? But they have to have 60 votes in the Senate. Chuck Schumer's got to release a handful of people to come along to do the right thing and keep the doors open for the country. What happens if they don't? This is really important. I mean, the markets will be rattled, I'm sure, because of the uncertainty that we don't need to be adding into this. You'll have a delay of the BLS jobs report is due October 3rd. That will be delayed. But importantly, real services, real benefits that the American people depend upon. Troops won't be paid. TSA agents won't be paid. The WIC program, the Women, Infants, and Children Nutrition Program, and other food services will be delayed. FEMA services won't be provided. We have 2 hurricanes off the coast of the United States right now. I mean, we're in the middle of hurricane season. This is serious stuff. And Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are playing politics with all these people in the American People's Services. And they're willing to do it for political cover. That's the game. They can't face their far-left base. When they come on the program today, I think you're having them both. Ask Chuck Schumer what his real motivation is. He'll try to tell you it's about, these issues that end at the end of the calendar year, December 31. But what it's really about, he's running from AOC and the socialist base of their party who are going to challenge him in his next election. They said he didn't fight Trump when he did the right thing back in March and did a temporary funding measure, and now he's got to fight. And it's shameful. It really is.
Well said from the Speaker of the House. Now, once again, I do want to take you back in time. I like to do this from time to time, and God bless the internet for finding these clips. In this case, we're going to go back to 2007. You see, one of the things that they're arguing about in Washington right now is providing health care for illegal aliens. The former Speaker of the House and the former basically leader of the Democrat Party is Nancy Pelosi. Well, Nancy now is certainly in favor of going with her party and making sure they provide that health care coverage for the illegal aliens. She didn't always feel that way. Here's Nancy in her own words in 2007.
The undocumented are not allowed to receive benefits from this initiative. It was clear in the first bill. It's even clearer in the second bill. There's a cap on who can receive it, stronger language as to undocumented. No illegal aliens, to use your term, I prefer undocumented, are able to get benefits.
Well, it seems very plain there. Nancy Pelosi was not in favor of what she's now in favor of. And I suspect the Speaker of the House is onto something when he says this is really about the Democrat leaders trying to hide from the far left branch of their party. We have a similar problem here in Canada. There's a lot of policy from the federal Liberals that is heavily influenced by the left-leaning part of their party. And I mean far left part of their party. So I don't know where we go from here, but the U.S. government is not going to get anything done. People aren't going to get paid. And there's a lot of fear that the Trump administration is going to use this as an excuse to clean house, to get rid of a whole bunch of employees that they don't really need or want on the books. Here's a little bit of President Trump speaking yesterday.
We could come up and through this whole thing, because, I don't know, we'll probably have a shutdown because one of the things they want to do is they want to give incredible Medicare, the Cadillac Medicare, to illegal immigrants. And what that does is it keeps them coming into our country, and like they do in California. And no country can afford that. No country. And we have the border stopped up. We have it closed. We have nobody for 4 months. Zero people came in. That wasn't me. That's by the authorities who happen to be liberally oriented. But just think of that. We have people offering health care to people all over the world that they can't afford to pay. And that's the Democrats. And what that does is it brings people into the country because they want to come in for the health care. But no country can afford it, and they can't afford it. So we cannot allow them to charge tremendous amounts of money for health care for people that aren't even citizens. And in many cases, they come in from prisons, jails, and mental institutions. And we can't let that happen.
President Trump saying it the way it is, that they simply cannot offer those health care benefits to illegal aliens that are in their country. He just won't allow it. And that creates the standstill that the U.S. government is at. You know, the government has shut down in the past. It's happened several times. This one feels different, though. I have a feeling this one might last a while, and I don't know who's going to blink first, but I have a feeling it's not going to be the Trump administration. They're pretty passionate about this one, so the Democrats are going to have to come to the table and agree to drop that request that illegal immigrants get, or illegal aliens, whatever you want to say. If I'm using a term that you don't like, I apologize. There's so many different ways to say it, but I think by and large, everybody understands what I'm talking about. People that are in America that are not supposed to be in America, if you offer them health care coverage, they're going to keep coming. Word circulates around the world very quickly that if something is free in America or in Canada, go and take advantage of it. And that's why so many of them do. Here's a little bit more of President Trump, although this was another part of the day. Him in the Oval Office talking again about a government shutdown.
Mr. President, as we inch closer to a government shutdown this morning, you said you might do a lot of layoffs. If DOGE is already reducing the federal workforce, why is it necessary to link more federal jobs cut to a shutdown?
Well, the Democrats want to shut it down, so when you shut it down, you have to do layoffs. So we'd be laying off a lot of people that are going to be very affected, and the Democrats, they're going to be Democrats. As you know, no country can afford to pay for illegal immigration, health care for everybody that comes into the country, and that's what they're insisting. And obviously, I have an obligation to not accept that. That would affect everybody. You know, when I see what we're doing with AI and all the plants that are opening up in the country, $17 trillion is coming in. If you compare that to Biden had, in 4 years, less than $1 trillion. We have 17 trillion, more than that. I think it's going to be much more than that, David, by the end of this year. I think it's going to be far over that. It's a record. It's already a record in 8 months. It's a record by a lot. And so we're doing well as a country, so the last thing we want to do is shut it down. But a lot of good can come down from shutdowns. We can get rid of a lot of things that we didn't want, and they'd be Democrat things, but they want open borders. They want men playing in women's sports. They want transgender for everybody. They never stop. They don't learn. We won an election in a landslide. They just don't learn. So we have no choice. I have to do that for the country. Yes.
You mentioned.
Well, the president seems to not be that upset about this government shutdown because it seems like it gives him an open lane to enact even more of the platform that he ran on, shrinking the size of the government. It seems like the people who are going to lose here are the employees of the federal government, depending on how long this shutdown lasts and depending on how many people lose their job. But either way, I'm thinking about them and everybody else who's impacted by this. Here's hoping cooler heads can prevail. This is a topic we should be able to agree on. Hey, listen, if you came here illegally, if you're not supposed to be here, if you've been told to leave, no, you don't get the social safety net, especially if you don't pay taxes here. No, you don't get to take advantage of the healthcare system. It's a conversation that's happening in America, and I think it's a conversation that we've got to have here as well, because a similar thing is happening in Canada, and it makes our healthcare system basically unsustainable and unusable. How many people have waited in an ER waiting room for hours? You know, part of the reason that we can go to that hospital and not get a bill is because we pay a ridiculous amount of taxes in this country. Why would some people get to access that system completely free as a handout on top of all of the other handouts that they're given by our federal government. Immigration is a huge issue. It began under our previous leaders in America, Joe Biden, and in Canada under Justin Trudeau. And we've got to clean up this problem. This seems like an issue we should be able to come to a compromise on. One more thing, by the way, along those lines, you've likely heard here in Canada, we also have an immigration problem. Well, the mayor of Toronto, one of my favorite people lately, for all the wrong reasons, Olivia Chow, again, mayor of Toronto, is now saying she's going to have to raise Torontonians' taxes unless the federal government here in Canada comes forward and gives them $107 million to make up the money they've spent housing people that aren't even supposed to be here.
We have been providing shelter to people who arrived to Toronto fleeing violence, war, and persecution. But now the federal government won't pay their bills for the service, and the city is short by $107 million. We can either stop sheltering refugees claimants, leave them on the street, which will make homelessness worse, reversing the progress we made on reducing the number of encampments. Or Torontonians will have to pay for it through their property taxes. Neither is fair. So the government, the federal government, must fulfill its responsibility.
How dare she? How dare Olivia Chow come out there and wave her finger in the face of Toronto taxpayers and say, hey, unless the federal government comes up with money, I'm going to stick you with the bill for it. What, do we seriously not want to provide housing and shelter for people that are fleeing persecution and whatever else in their own countries? Well, I don't know if Olivia knows, because I don't give her credit for being an overly intelligent woman or very up on the issues. I've never seen a really insightful comment from Olivia Chow in a setting like this. Nothing that really made me stop and think, maybe she's got a point. When it comes to Olivia Chow, she needs to understand that the people who came here with those bogus refugee claims, and the vast majority of them are bogus, as soon as they get in front of an adjudicator, that person is going to say, nope, that's not a reason that you deserve asylum status. Get back where you came from. And then we don't even know if they leave, because we don't even seem to track them here in Canada. We've been putting these people up in hotels and giving them money to live off of and all kinds of stuff, including access to our healthcare system. They racked up a bill of $107 million. Now Olivia's turning to the taxpayers and saying, well, now it's your problem. I don't remember ever having a conversation about this in the first place. Olivia did that. Olivia Chow is the one who's now out here saying, we can't just leave them on the street. It'll make our shelter problem worse. Listen, if you had said to people before this massive influx of people started coming here, hey, listen, your taxes are going to go up because we need to house these people, there would have been an uproar back then, and people would have said, no, don't let them come here. You send an adjudicator to Pearson Airport, and every single person who declares asylum or tries to claim it, pull them into a room, ask them a few questions, and decide right then and there if that's a legitimate claim that's worth investigating further, or one where, you know what, it's a bona fide claim, let them in. Again, the vast majority of them are not legit, and we've been taking care of them like they do have a reasonable claim for asylum. $107 million bill Olivia has racked up in hotels and all sorts of stuff. Now she's coming back to the taxpayers. Now she wants the taxpayers' input on this, wants the taxpayers to get behind her. I don't think so. It was wildly irresponsible how they spent taxpayer money here. And I don't know why any taxpayer should be threatened with, you know what? If Mark Carney doesn't come through, we're going to jam you with a huge property tax increase to pay for all the asylum claimants. No, we never wanted them here in the first place. This is a failure of government. Sticking this bill on the taxpayers, particularly property taxpayers, is completely wrong. And Olivia Chow is once again wildly out to lunch. But the good news is only one more year, Toronto. You only have to deal with her for one more year. And then next fall, we fire them all and you can get a good, competent mayor who's going to spend your tax money responsibly. I want to go back to Donald Trump for just a second. This is something we haven't heard in a while. Yesterday, Donald Trump was doing a weird speech. He was speaking to military generals and such. I guess they brought in all of their military leaders from around the world for a special
physical fitness.
Hold on a second, Pete. They brought them in for a special address from the Secretary of War and from the President. And they wanted to clear up a few things about where the administration stands and where the armed forces in America are going. So we'll start off here with, again, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. Here's him addressing the top military leaders in America.
With physical fitness and appearance. If the Secretary of War can do regular, hard PT, so can every member of our joint force. Frankly, it's tiring to look out at combat formations, or really any formation, and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look. It is bad, and it's not who we are. So whether you're an airborne ranger or a chairborne ranger, a brand new private or a 4-star general, you need to meet the height and weight standards and pass your PT test. And as the chairman said, yes, there is no PT test. But today, at my direction, every member of the joint force at every rank is required to take a PT test twice a year, as well as meet height and weight requirements twice a year, every year of service. Also today, at my direction, every warrior across our joint force is required to do PT every duty day. Should be common sense. I mean, most units do that already.
Just a little bit of how they are transforming the U.S. Armed Forces. That's an interesting comment from Pete Hegseth. He is basically saying you will be fit. You will be a model. You will be an example. You are going to keep up your fitness. No longer does it work that, hey, you got the job and it's yours forever, no matter how much you let yourself go. He's saying they are going to be physically fit and good role models. He also talked about the need to get rid of wokeness and some of the transgender ideology that has been surfacing in the U.S. Armed Forces lately. And if you want to go back and watch the speech, go ahead, but I'm going to warn you, his mic sounded terrible, as you just heard, and it was a little dry, but not nearly as dry as the president's speech himself. I'm not going to play very much of this. I'm only going to play the part that impacts Canada. But once again, yesterday, Donald Trump, out of nowhere, brought up the 51st state again.
And Canada called me a couple of weeks ago. They want to be part of it. To which I said, well, why don't you just join our country? You become 51, become the 51st state, and you get it for free. So I don't know if that made a big impact, but it does make a lot of sense. It actually makes, because they're having a hard time up there in Canada now, because as you know, with tariffs, everyone's coming into our country. We have more investment than we've ever had before, $17 trillion.
Well, that's interesting. President Trump was talking about the Golden Dome missile defense system for North America there, which will protect Canada. And we'd known that Prime Minister Carney had told President Trump he's interested in Canada being part of the Golden Dome. That would be a real easy way to sink a lot of money into us meeting our NATO spending targets by funding that. So, okay, fine. But the president says when he spoke to the prime minister, and presumably he only deals with the prime minister, when he spoke to him a couple of weeks ago about the Golden Dome, again, Trump suggested, why don't you guys just become the 51st state? Then you don't have to pay anything for this. And he knows that we're struggling a lot up here in Canada. He said it's mainly because so many companies are fleeing to America. And yeah, that's certainly part of it. But we've got our own problems here between the immigration issues, the inflation issues. The dollar is really, really low. It's again below 72 cents US today. There's a lot of issues here. And clearly the president is well briefed on that. So apparently he says he mentioned the 51st state again to Mark Carney. Why didn't Mark Carney bring that up? Why didn't Mark Carney let us know that, again, the president has suggested that we become the 51st state? You know, there was a while there where anytime Trump mentioned the 51st state, it was all over the news and it lasted in the cycle for days. There was a time when Carney himself was exploiting that as much as possible to get elected. He says he's making progress in trying to reach a deal with the Americans, but the Americans are still bringing up the 51st state thing. And frankly, I'm now starting to question again Where are we at here as far as trying to work out a deal with America is concerned? Where are we at? Because it seems like we've gone backwards. More tariffs introduced yesterday, more of them on softwood lumber. Doesn't seem like we're getting any further ahead here. Now Trump's again talking about the 51st state. How are we going to get a deal done when the president is doing stuff like that? Well, he's only doing stuff like that, saying things like the 51st state, because he knows we're vulnerable right now. I really hope somebody steps up for Canada at some point soon. You know, all the things that we said we needed to do to make ourselves our own best customer and less reliant on the Americans, we haven't really done any of them yet. It's almost like we're just waiting for this house of cards to collapse, and it feels like that's coming soon. The StatsCan data that came out last week did not clearly indicate that we're in a recession. We would need to see 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. And there was like a month in there where we did better than we thought we would. And I'm not even sure if I believe those numbers, but it's safe to say we're in a recession. A lot of people are losing their jobs. And frankly, until we get something done with the Americans, I think this trend is just going to keep going on. Now I'm going to switch gears, and the last thing I'm going to try and cover in this episode is a topic that's certainly near and dear to a lot of our hearts. Food insecurity in particular. As you no doubt know, there's a lot of Canadians in record numbers visiting food banks. Yesterday, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre went to a food bank. I'll correct myself here. This was actually on Monday. He went to a food bank and he was talking about the cost of food. Listen to this.
I want to thank the Fire of God Ministries for their food bank work. They have already fed 70,000 visitors, 70,000 visits as of July. Last year, it was 64,000 visits for the entire year. So they've already passed last year's demand and still half the year remains to go. It's a big change. As you can see, anybody who walks down Murray Street can see an incredible change. Those of you who live in Ottawa, you'll remember that 10 years ago, you didn't see a block and a half of homeless people dying of drug addictions, living on the streets, but it is just another image of life falling apart after a decade of liberal inflation, liberal housing crisis, liberal drug policies, and liberal chaos. Policies that some people thought might reverse under Mark Carney, but in fact have worsened under his leadership. It is more drugs, more costs, more crises, more of the same under Mark Carney's Liberals. And nowhere is this more true than when it comes to food prices, which are in a total and absolute crisis.
I'll pause Pierre Poilievre there for just a second, just to catch up here. Does anyone disagree with what he just said? Is there any single person listening right now that thinks he's wrong? This is going in the right direction. Everything is going well. Or can we at least all agree that particularly when it comes to the topic of food security, there's a lot of people that are struggling right now and know that is not good.
Prices are rising faster today than they were when Mark Carney took office, promising to lower them. And why is this? Well, because the Liberals have 4 sneaky grocery taxes that are embedded in everything you buy. First, the industrial carbon tax on fertilizer and farm equipment drives up the cost for our producers. Second, they're gradually raising a sneaky new carbon tax on gas and diesel, which will rise to 17 cents a litre, the same level of the previous Liberal carbon tax. Then there's the food packaging tax, which they are putting in place that will raise the cost of food and groceries by $400 per year per family. And then, of course, there's the worst tax of all, and that is the inflation tax. And that happens when governments run enormous deficits that they pay for by printing money, and that bids up the cost of everything. You'll recall that when I said that back in 2021 and 2022, some misinformed commentators denied that it was money printing. Of course, it was money printing, and it was literally money printing. They literally printed money, increased the number of printed paper bills. So it was like, it's not just a figurative statement. So some misinformed commentators got that wrong, and Canadians paid the price. One of those commentators, of course, was Mark Carney himself, who said that money printing would be necessary. He advised Justin Trudeau to do it. Obviously, we had the inflation crisis. We know that he caused a disastrous inflation crisis in the United Kingdom, where he is reviled by consumers who can no longer.
I'm not going to turn it into a big hate fest here for Prime Minister Carney, but again, if you're being objective, what Pierre Poilievre just said is absolutely right. There are sneaky hidden taxes that are affecting our grocery prices, and grocery prices are way, way, way too high right now. Yes, the non-consumer part of the carbon tax is a big issue. Inflation, I'm going to disagree with Pierre there. It's not a tax per se, but it certainly is something that's brought on by government and by money printing. Also, this tax on food packaging. What's that all about? And why the tax on diesel? What's that all about? We know that food arrives at the grocery store via truck. When you tax diesel heavier, that of course passes on more cost to the store, which then gets passed on to us. We can see exactly how this happened. The question is, what do we do now? Let's hear a little bit more from Pierre. Then I'm going to get to one question from the Q&A that I think everybody should hear.
Crystal, a 45-year-old single mother of 3, has been coming here to Fire of God Food Bank since 2019, finds grocery prices increasingly unaffordable, and she's desperate. She has no idea what she's going to do. You know, when on Sundays they open here, what is it, at noon or 11? 12:30, and the people arrive. What time do they start lining? 7 a.m. they start lining up here for 12:30 food. And then on the weekday?
We open at 4:30.
And?
11 a.m.
11 a.m. people line up for a 4:30 visit to the food bank. That is the hell that Mark Carney and the Liberals have brought to our streets. Mark Carney, and he will say, don't blame me. He was busy traveling the world when all this happened. Well, I'm not going to hold Mark Carney to my standard. I'm going to hold him to his own. He promised in the election he'd bring more affordable food. He said that Canadians should judge him by their experience at the grocery store. That's a quote. Since that time, beef is up 33%, soup 26%, grapes 24%, coffee 22%, beef stewing cuts 22%. And it's not a global issue. It's not a foreign issue. It's a Mark Carney Liberal issue. Food prices are rising 48% faster in Canada than they are in the United States of America. And you can't blame tariffs, because American tariffs do not apply on food consumed here in Canada. So no more excuses, no more distractions. It's time for Mark Carney to take responsibility for the food price hell that he is causing in this country. In fact, I'm
going to stop Pierre there because I don't need all of the partisan attacks, but I do certainly enjoy the information. And yeah, Pierre is absolutely right. That is something that Prime Minister Carney said during the election campaign, to judge him by grocery prices. Okay, so can we judge now, or how much time are we supposed to give him before we judge him on the grocery prices? Because I don't see any light on the horizon that prices are about to get lower. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen. And when you think about it, what a tragedy is this? We have some of the best farming land in the world right here in Canada. We could be growing an unlimited supply of food for the country. And we're paying some outrageous prices. I still don't understand how I can go to the grocery store and pay less for American tomatoes than I can for tomatoes that were grown in Ontario. How does that even work? The system is messed up. It definitely needs a change. And whether you think the change starts in Ottawa or you think the change is needed at the grocer level, either way, I think we all agree something has got to change, because this is not sustainable. Glad to hear Pierre talking about an important issue like that, because sometimes we do forget about it. And if you don't go to the food bank on a regular basis, or even occasionally, maybe you're not aware of where they are or how many of your fellow Canadians are going there. It's sad and it's scary. Right now, there's a lot of food drives that are getting fired up because, well, they always do their big push around Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving is now just over a week away. We've really got to make some progress on this. We have got to find a way to fund these food banks so they've got food when people come in, and to figure out how to get out of the mess we're in now. Government adding to grocery prices is very much like the Bank of Canada adding to housing costs. You know, when the Bank of Canada talks about inflation, part of the inflation that impacts their decision is inflation on housing. They never actually mention, though, that their high interest rates are a major factor in making housing so expensive. Same with groceries. You know, the government can come out and talk about, we're going to bring down grocery prices. We'll do this. We'll do that. What about government's role in lowering those prices? If we cut out some of the taxes and some of the regulation that these grocery stores have to deal with, I have to think that prices would come down. I would think grocery stores would like to sell more, and they will if prices come down. But right now, everybody's watching every penny, and it seems like we're just not getting anywhere. You know what I mean? I said there was one question and answer I want to play. This is Pierre Poilievre again at the food bank on Monday.
Good morning, Pierre. Willie Temtem with True North.
Sorry, with who?
True North.
True North.
This past week, we saw a church burning in Canada, a tragic incident at a church in Michigan, and over 100 incidents of church burning or vandalism since 2021 in Canada.
Yes.
What do you make of the sectarian strife seen targeting towards Christians? Do you think the government's doing enough to combat this, and what would you do?
I think it's terrible. No, the government is not doing enough, and I would do a lot more. So let's recap where we are. 100 churches have been burned. You hear almost nothing from the Liberal government about this. Christians may be the number one group that is victims of hate-based violence. But of course, it's not politically correct to say that. 100 terrorist attacks against Canadian churches. This anti-Christian hate has got to stop. We've seen with this Liberal government is the number of things they've done to allow this. One, they've separated people into groups. Their ideology seeks to identity politics, divides one group against another, and then we're surprised when that leads to violence. Two, the Liberals have reduced criminal penalties for arson, so people are not afraid to get caught burning things down anymore. And three, they have failed to put law enforcement resources where they belong, which is to say going after criminals rather than targeting farmers, duck hunters, and professional sport shooters. So Conservatives would take exactly the opposite approach. We would bring in mandatory prison sentences for extortionists. We would crack down on hate crime, which is more than doubled under the Liberals, with tougher laws that throw criminals in prison. We used to make sure that the foreign criminals that are in our country illegally are kicked out of Canada. And we would redirect resources away from banning duck hunters, farmers, and sport shooters towards more police and border services that will keep all Canadians safe. Because frankly, Canadians of all faiths, including Christians, deserve to worship in peace.
Well said from Pierre Poilievre. I had to double check his numbers, and he's certainly right. 100 Christian churches have been burned down in Canada. How often do you see that on the national news? Because I don't think I've ever seen it. Unless it's some big historic church in Toronto or Montreal, it's not getting covered on the national news. But clearly this is happening in a lot of places if 100 churches have been burned down. This is a big problem. He's talking about hate against Christians. And he said it himself. I guess it's not politically correct to say that, but it's true. There is clearly hate being lobbed at Christians. 100 churches burned down. I don't know if this is apples to apples. And I certainly don't want to pit one group against another. We've got enough of that nonsense going on in this country. So let me just put it like this in the most respectful way I can. Christian church burns down in Canada, doesn't even make the news. What if a Jewish synagogue were burnt to the ground? What if a temple were burnt to the ground? What if a mosque were burnt to the ground? I have a feeling you'd see it on the news. Don't you agree? That would probably make the news. And there would probably be a massive investigation with the fire chief and the chief of police there holding a news conference, and they'd be demanding accountability, and they would be going after the people who would dare to burn down one of those places of worship. I haven't heard that against the Christian churches that have been burnt down, and I don't understand why. Well, actually, I think I do, but I'll leave it at that. Friends, thank you for checking into this episode. I want to remind you there are 2 episodes that came out before this one that I think are worth listening to. I talked to Liberal Member of Provincial Parliament, Rob Cerjanec, about speed enforcement cameras. I also talked to the Mayor of Guelph, Cam Guthrie, about speed enforcement cameras. Those are great episodes. They're shorter too, like 20, 25 minutes. If you get a chance today, listen to those. And I would like that to be the standard for civil discourse. The standard for how, even if you disagree with each other, you can have a respectful conversation about issues and possibly teach each other something, learn from each other. That's what I did. And I want to thank Rob again. And I want to thank Cam Guthrie for being on the podcast. I appreciate their time. Hit that download button and subscribe, because there's going to be more of those type episodes coming soon. And again, those interviews, if you want to watch them, are also available on YouTube. Friends, have yourselves an amazing day. I'll catch you right back here tomorrow.